is LBC. Call Clegg. Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg takes your calls with Nick Ferrari at breakfast. 0845 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. Leading Britain's conversation. This is Call Clegg on LBC.
It's 9 o'clock on Thursday, the 20th of February, and that means it's time for Call Clegg with me, Nick Clegg, here on LBC. So I'm taking your questions for the next half an hour. If you want to get involved, then call on 0845 6060 973 or email at nickclegg@lbc.co.uk. And of course, you can also watch on the website, lbc.co.uk. So let's go straight to the first call. Nadia in Egham. Hello, Nadia.
Hello, how you doing?
I'm right, how are you?
Yeah, not so bad. Drained from all this flooding that's been going on.
Oh, yeah.
I suppose the question that's on everybody's mind is insurance. Okay, so if we claim on for flooding, will all the insurance companies reinsure us? And also, the premiums, are they going to go sky high and we just won't be able to afford to pay them?
Have you been flooded out of your home, Nadia, or have you?
I haven't, but a lot of my street have, and it's been absolutely awful. I mean, people really have lost everything. It's just been an absolute nightmare, and it's not just that we've had to deal with. The fact is, we've had looters. So
have you?
You go away, and we've had looters down the road. The water stinks. It's absolutely awful. So it's been everything.
Oh, look, I'm so sorry to hear that. And well, look, you know better than I do. It's just terrible for people who are affected. And as you know, the groundwater now is rising in so many parts of the country that I'd love to say I think it's all going to seep away and everything's going to be back to normal very quick. I don't think it is. I think we are in this bluntly still for the long haul. Some parts of the country are going to be affected by the amount of water which is now saturating the ground for quite a long period of time. We got, as you know, the insurance companies into Downing Street just the other day. I was talking to the minister, one of the ministers involved in that meeting, Dan Rogerson, one of the Lib Dem ministers dealing with the flooding crisis. He said that the insurance industry sort of get that they've got to learn the lessons back in 2007. Do you remember when there were a lot of criticisms that they weren't responding fast enough, weren't responding generously enough? I can't tell you, Nadia, exactly what's going to happen in each particular case, and because it depends on the insurance company, depends on your property, depends on your circumstances, but I think we're making a bit of headway with the insurance industry to avoid the worst mistakes of what happened back in 2007. So people are being helped when they need help and are not suddenly then facing a complete sort of change in the terms of trade, if you like, between themselves and the insurance industry. I can't promise you, of course not, I can't promise you that every policy is going to stay the same, every premium is going to stay the same. That is not something I can responsibly promise, but I think that the insurance industry get that they've got to learn the lessons from what happened back in 2007.
See, the trouble is, I mean, there's people like myself. I'm a single mum with four children. I work. I'm not on benefits. I really can't afford for my premiums to go sky high. This wasn't our fault. It's not like we've neglected our homes. This is nothing to do with us, and it was totally out of our control. I'm lucky the water didn't come in my house. It's just coming through my back doors, but I'm built up quite high. My neighbours opposite me, their houses are completely normal. They're built down, and they've lost everything, absolutely everything. And I just feel maybe there could be some sort of reassurance to say, okay, they're not going to go sky high. You can reinsure your flooded home. They're not, and just to reassure them. I mean, they must feel awful as it is.
Well, look, obviously, you quite rightly feel for your neighbours. I mean, you are aware. I'm sure I hope they're aware that this is slightly separate from their relationship with the insurance company. But there are a number of things that are now available to them. If they, as they redo their home, they can be given a £5,000 grant to put in measures to make their homes better protected against flooding in the future. If they've been driven out of their home, that they won't have to pay council tax for the period of time during which they're out of their home. And of course businesses, because I can imagine businesses in the Egham area, even ones which haven't been directly affected by the water, might have been indirectly affected by customers not being able to get to them, and they again will be able to have access to emergency funds that we've established. So look, there is help out there, but I mean, my heart goes out to you, Nadia, and indeed to everybody else on your street.
Nadia, it's Nick Ferrari here. I've just got to ask you a couple of questions. Have you been a victim of looting then, Nadia?
No, luckily enough not. But I will say, when this first happened, I got onto the police because we heard that people were being looted, and they have been absolutely great down our road. Although they couldn't obviously have someone sitting at the end of the road 24/7, we have seen them down there really regularly. So, but we know in the next streets they've been. I know.
Well, and it has been right across the country. It's good to hear that the authorities are taking note of that. Nadia, thank you. We must move on to other calls. Mr. Clegg.
William in Stafford. Hello.
Hi, Nick. Good morning to you. How are you?
I'm all right, William. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good.
My question, Nick, revolves around food banks.
Yep.
I wanted to know why you needed the House of Bread and my 200 volunteers to feed the UK. And where is the evidence of fairness and compassion around the very most vulnerable people in our society who I support week in, week out?
Do you, William, work in a food bank?
I do. I run a House of Bread charity. We feed about 100 meals a week now to folk who are on the very edges of society, and we run a food bank, a clothing bank, and we support these folk. And the thing is, Nick, it's the perception. There's a perception of lack of fairness and compassion from this government. So although you might be doing the right thing, and I'm not making a political statement, you've got a handle on the numbers. The fact is, on the ground, and it happened last night, and I'll be feeding them today, it is perceived as unfair. The vulnerable folk are feeling out of the loop. They want to help. And I've got 200 volunteers who are empowered to do that through House of Bread. How can we get the government to get that message over that you are being as fair and compassionate as I know you probably are, because you care about you and your family?
Hold on the line, Mr. Clegg.
Well, William, first can I obviously pay tribute to you and all the other volunteers who are helping out people who desperately need help. And as you know, food banks have been around for some considerable amount of time. More people are using them right now, and I think it is great that there are people like you who out of the sort of compassion in your heart, you want to help those who are vulnerable. And I don't in any way want to kind of sort of airbrush out of the fact that of course it is distressing when you see people who need that kind of help. I have the same instinct as you no doubt do, which is, surely we should be able to find something for everybody to do. There should be work for everybody. Of course, life is never quite as straightforward as that. And what we have tried to do in this government, what we've focused on, is getting as many people into work as possible, because in the long run, the best way to help people is to give them the support that they can help themselves. Not, of course, there are some. But can I just finish, William? Because it's quite important. This, I mean, because a lot of numbers are bandied around. It is quite important to remember that you've got 1.3 million more people in work now than when we came into office. Actually, 1 million of the new jobs created are full-time jobs. So it's not just sort of poorly paid or just part-time jobs. And the welfare budget constitutes about a quarter of all the money that we spend on your behalf, on taxpayers' behalf. And here's the bottom line, William. At a time when, as you know, we inherited this massive black hole in our public finances, there's nothing fair about simply saying, well, we're not going to kind of deal with our debts. We're going to let our children and our grandchildren do it. You inevitably can't duck the fact that some of those savings come from a quarter of total public spending. And that's why what we've done is try to make sure that the way that we reform welfare and we reform the tax system encourages people into work, whilst of course ensuring, and I have a huge amount of respect for Vincent Nichols, I like him, I've met him a number of times, but I think to say that the safety net has been removed altogether is an exaggeration.
He's
it's
the
not
Catholic
right.
Archbishop of Westminster, just to remind listeners.
Yeah, you know that, William. So look, we're trying to get the balance right. The country's gone through an incredibly difficult time. There are people who, of course, face very difficult circumstances, but I think the way to move forward is to make sure that there's always an incentive for people to work where they can do so.
William, a response from you.
Yeah, Nick, I understand that. Here's the thing. I'm on benefits. I'm sanctioned for 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 16 weeks, whatever it is. I personally don't care what the sanction is. You've got no food in your house. Where are you going? Where's your benefits to cover that time? Because without that initial support, that's where the food bank comes in. Because I'm speaking to people every single day. I will be speaking to people tonight. It's people who've been sanctioned for 2, 4, 8 weeks. And the benefit officer saying, well, sorry, guys, you can't have your benefits, whatever the reason is. And I don't care what those reasons are.
Sure.
What I care about is where is that family getting the food?
No, but William, look, I hear what you say, but can I just on this issue about the conditionality in welfare? I mean, firstly, where there is incompetence in the welfare system, and you'll know better than I do in your House of Bread operation, how many people come in because basically there is incompetence on the part of the people who are handing out the benefits, and I think we've tried to really make sure the system is more efficient, so there are fewer. There are fewer mistakes, if you like, which then lead to people having to go and ask you for help. But that's sort of one category. And as I say, we've done a lot of work to try and reduce, not eliminate, but reduce the cases where people are having to come to you because they, through a mistake, have not been given the support they need. But then there's the issue about the sanctions. Now, look, I think most people in this country accept that, of course, you need to have a safety net. Of course, you need to give help for people who are vulnerable. But for those, for instance, who are being given support to go out to look for work, there has to be some kind of conditionality. You can't just be given benefits, if you like, with no strings attached and no questions asked when you're being given support to try and find your way back into work. And where people ignore those conditions, and those conditions are made very, very clear right up front, then I think it is, I'm afraid, justifiable to say, look, I'm sorry, you can't just receive these benefits and not abide by the conditions which apply to them in the first place.
In response, thank you for your call, William. Just to clarify a couple of things. In response to the Archbishop of Westminster's intervention, the Prime Minister, in an article in a newspaper yesterday, Mr. Clegg, talked about it as being morally right to initiate these welfare reforms. You may be aware that subsequently there's been an open letter to another paper today, the Daily Mirror, signed by 27 Anglican bishops and other faith leaders, that talks about the coalition, of which, of course, you're deputy leader, creating a national crisis. Is it a moral duty, then?
I do think it is a good thing to try and, in government, to try and do everything you can to encourage people to get into work so they can look after themselves.
So
and
it is
their
a
own
moral
family.
duty.
I think it is a good thing. If you don't mind, I'll choose my own words. I think it's a good thing in if you're in public life to try and change the system we've got at the moment so that you have less dependency, where people, in a sense, can, in some cases, remain on welfare almost as a way of living, if you like, and actually instead encourage them to go out and work. And that's why this change that we have in the welfare system, combined with raising the point at which you pay income tax so that you keep more of the money you earn, even if you're on low and middle incomes, is so important. And that's why we've seen more and more people into work. But that doesn't mean, I cannot stress enough, that doesn't mean we should somehow act in a punitive way to people on benefits. Far from it. There are some people who are too vulnerable, who need help.
Isn't it the ones that the church are talking about, lastly, on this, Mr. Clegg? Isn't it those, I hear what you say, those who need nudging to work, but is the church and these bishops and others, they're talking about those at the very bottom, aren't they? The most vulnerable who still need help.
Absolutely, and they do need help, and that's why I think we should be proud rather than denigrate our welfare system. It is important that we have a safety net for fellow citizens who simply can't look after themselves and need support, and it's reason why we spend billions and billions and billions of pounds of taxpayers' money on those kind of forms of support. But what we're doing as a government, something I fully support, is first simplifying the system because it had become far too complex, and secondly, sharpening the incentive to work at all times. It is surely always better to see people in work rather than on benefits.
Let's go to other calls.
Sanji in Kingston upon Thames. Hello, Sanji.
Hi there, Nick. Hi there. Thanks for taking my call.
Not at all.
Just wondering about the care.data issues that are going on at the moment. Obviously, yesterday we had the announcement that the rollout of care.data in the NHS is going to be delayed so patients have more time to make up their mind and have further information. Now, the whole programme's been fairly badly handled up to now. From what we've seen, I think it's quite clear that a lot of patients haven't had information. There's been a bad rollout of the way this has had, and of course in the press there's been various different stories. We've had stories such as 41% of GPs stating they will opt out themselves from actually sharing data, and that was by Pulse, who's of course the GP.
Are you a GP, Sanji?
I'm not actually. I've worked in healthcare for over 10 years.
All right. Do you work in this area on use
over
of data?
10 years at senior levels. I've been involved in information sharing projects which have been going on, as we know. The NHS has tried to share information for a long, long time, and
so
there are different ways to do it.
I'm sorry, it's Nick Ferrari here. Moving to your question of Deputy Prime Minister, if I could, Sanji.
Very, very quickly then. As we've seen with care.data, people haven't really got the information. What's your view on it? Are you actually thinking of opting out? Will you be opting out yourself?
No, I won't. And I'm obviously, as a leader of a Liberal Party, I'm always very vigilant about any storing or pooling of personal data when it comes to privacy and data protection and so on. But having looked at this quite closely, I think this is a sensible measure, because all the evidence is that by having that anonymised data, and it's really important for people to understand this, their data is not, their name and their address is not stored somewhere, but their anonymous identity is stored, plus their medical details. It is a very, very powerful tool to help in research. It's a very, very powerful tool in helping the NHS keep us well and provide better care. And as I suspect, Sanjay, you know better than I do, we've been pooling this data in the hospital sector for really quite a long period of time. This is just about doing that in the GP sector. But, and here's the big but, I completely agree with you, the public don't know about it. They haven't been well informed. It's right for NHS England to have taken the decision themselves, as they have done, to therefore delay the introduction of this and to work far harder to inform people, to also explain to people that they've got the option to opt out if they want, but also to explain the benefits of this in terms of better medical research and therefore better medical care. So I think it's right they're going to take more time. It's right they're going to spend more time explaining this to the public. They've got to work with the Information Commissioner to make sure that all the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted in terms of data protection and privacy, which I think they have taken care to get right. But they need to take more time to get it right.
Okay, thanks for that. I mean, I just wonder if you think they're actually handling it correctly, because obviously they were originally forced into informing patients.
I think we've had some pretty strong views. Just last year, thank you very much for your call, Sanji. I'm only moving on because there's others we have to get involved. Just a supplementary question on this, which comes in from an email from Raquel in Dartford. In Scotland, you have to opt in. Why shouldn't it be the same for NHS England?
I think that's one of the reasons why NHS England should take more time to explain to people and explain to Raquel and all of us that if you want to opt out, you can.
But why shouldn't it be an opt-in, as apparently they do in Scotland? That seems to make more sense. I mean, you're persuaded of the merits. I'm not, for whatever reason.
Okay, well then you can opt out.
I can.
And indeed Raquel can opt out.
Wouldn't it be better that you had to opt in as they are? Why in Scotland they do it that way, do you suppose?
Well, one of the great virtues of the United Kingdom, dare I say it, is that we can do different things even though we're part of the same family of nations.
Are we all in this together?
Well, we certainly win the United Kingdom together, and I hope we remain together.
Indeed,
but
as does David Bowie.
As does David Bowie. Yeah, exactly. One of my great childhood heroes. There you go. It's not. We don't, just because they do it like that north of the border doesn't mean we have to do it in exactly the same way south of the border. I think the judgment from NHS England is to get the best benefits for patients, so that we have better NHS care, better research, better treatment for medical conditions.
Deputy Prime Minister.
Yes.
I would feel very nervous now, and this is my first question to you, by the way, if you've noticed from me, and we're 18 minutes in. I'd feel
You keep saying this every week now, as if it's some sort of great...
I'd feel very nervous now discussing with my doctor a rather nasty rash that might have appeared if I think it'd suddenly get out there, if it's no longer be anonymous.
But if you go to hospital, you've got a whole lot of data which goes onto a database. I suspect when you go to your local supermarket, you've got things which you...
Yeah, but I don't go to them about a rash, do I?
No, well, OK, I'm not going to ask you about your rash
I'm grateful for that.
On national television, on national radio. I think that would be inappropriate, really. And I'm a little squeamish on issues like that. But
you are sold on the merits.
Look, I think as long as it's clearly anonymised, as they put it in the jargon, so it's not Nick Ferrari of, Three Orchard Close or wherever you live. Yeah. It is a record of medical conditions which can then be provided to researchers so they can provide better care for your rash. I suspect for the sake of your rash, if not anything else, it might be a good thing to keep your data on that database.
If anybody's listening, it was only an example. Mr. Clegg, we move on.
Leslie in Bushy.
Hello, Mr. Clegg. I've got two questions for you. As Deputy Prime Minister in the Coalition for almost 4 years, you've been very critical of Labour's economic record, and you'll obviously agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Last weekend, on another radio station, you said that Labour had become more credible, and then if no party had an overall majority at the next election, you would tend to cosy up with Labour. I've got two questions for you.
I didn't actually say that, but go on.
Well, you did say that, because it's well reported, and I heard most of it. I have... The two questions I've got are very simple. Why should the PM not give you your P45 and marching orders? And secondly, have you absolutely no shame to be so disloyal? I think it's absolutely amazing that you can do that.
Well, I'm sorry to hear, Leslie, you feel strongly about it. I didn't, of course, say that. If you listen to the interview, what I said was actually a rather commonplace, sort of, rather unsurprising observation, which was that given that Labour appeared so completely unprepared for the hung Parliament in 2010, you would have thought maybe they have changed since then and are more open to planning for the possibility they might need to share power. I didn't say anything about their credibility on the economy. In fact, I remain as critical now as I always have done for Labour's failure to apologise for the economic mess they've created. So look, I mean, I think the reaction to those rather unsurprising observations was a little over the top. But look, there you go. That's the way people sometimes extrapolate from these kind of comments. Look, Labour can decide what they want to do after the next election. It's up to them, and it's up above and beyond everything else, Leslie. It's up to you and millions of voters in this country to decide what is going to happen at the next general election. It's not up to me or Ed Miliband or David Cameron. All I can say, and I was just in a sense being perfectly consistent about something I've said for ages, which is that the Liberal Democrats, of course we stand ready to play a role in a government where we think we can play an important part in continuing to reform and rebuild and renew our country. And I think if we were ever in coalition with Labour, we would be the guarantee of economic competence, because they certainly won't provide that. Just as in coalition with the Conservatives, we're the guarantee of fairness, because that's not something that the Conservatives are going to deliver on their own.
Well, there goes that budding friendship with Ed Balls now. You're talking about economic competence in that way, but I can hardly be surprised, because he's said of you, none of us want to be in coalition with the Lib Dems. This is Ed Balls speaking. Of you, it's one thing to break your promises in a manifesto to get into power, it's another to do that on the backs of the poor and the most disadvantaged. Are my two friends squabbling here?
Look, I just Labour can say what they like about me and about the future. I wouldn't believe everything you read in the papers. The point I would simply make.
How would you characterise your relationship at this time?
There's only one serious point here, which is firstly. Actually, I've just said one serious point, and then first, so there's two serious points here. Firstly, as I said to Leslie, it's the British people who will decide the outcome. All this endless speculation about what politicians think about each other and who's leaning this way and that way, it's all completely academic, because it's thankfully in a democracy, it's not actually up to individual politicians to decide the outcome of a general election. But secondly, I just simply would have thought, and this is it's just a sort of neutral, objective observation, I would have thought, given the volatility in British politics, given that there is a possibility, I wouldn't put it any stronger than that at this stage, there's a possibility that we might have another general election without a conclusive outcome, I would have thought all political parties should be thinking about the virtues and vices of sharing power with others. Now, I'm prepared to do that openly. I've been very open about the fact that I think any government with Liberal Democrats in it is a better government. If the other two parties either don't want to or want to stick their head in the sand, that's their choice. It's not my problem.
And you and Ed are getting on all right, are you?
I don't think I haven't seen or spoken to him for a while. It's not really a question about what people feel towards each other or about the individual relationships between individual politicians. I've never thought that. I've always thought, in a rather old-fashioned way, that it's up to the British people to give us their marching instructions.
I might just ask briefly to pause on calls if I could, Mr. Clegg. We might be getting a little bit ahead of yourself, because, of course, we're talking about the general election, and we have that European election coming up. You might have had sight of an article in today's Times newspaper. The Lib Dems face the disastrous prospect of losing all their MEPs at the European election. One of your most senior figures admitted. This is Tim Farron, the Lib Dem president, warning the party now faces, his words, the fight of our lives. Losing its MEPs would be a huge embarrassment for your party, Britain's most pro-European party. Those elections are on the way. UKIP is doing incredibly well, it would appear, from the polls. They did very well in that most recent by-election. They seem to be in tune with the British public, don't they, Mr. Clegg?
Well, look, at least, I of course disagree with Nigel Farage and UKIP, but at least they've got a clear position, which is they want to yank the United Kingdom out of the European Union. The same can't be said of the Conservatives, who, sort of split and flirting with exit, but not really saying so openly, and Labour, who don't really have their courage of their convictions on this. So there's a clear choice, isn't there? UKIP won out. I am the leader of the party of in, because I believe being in Europe means being in work. Over 3 million jobs in this country, directly or indirectly, depend on us being in the European Union. So that is a big choice.
But something about their message is clearly working. If you look at the most recent by-election, they did pretty well. You, I think, would accept that it was a disappointing night, if not a wipeout. I've got Nigel Farage sitting in that very seat tomorrow. He's going to tell me how UKIP is in tune with the public. He's going to tell him how they're on the march. He's going to tell me how they're looking forward to May. And you guys, even your president, seems to be beating a sort of retreat.
Well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I will, not least since you have Nigel Farage on the programme tomorrow, I will challenge Nigel Farage to a public, open debate about whether we should be in or out of the European Union, because that is now the choice facing this country, and he is the leader of the party of out. I'm the leader of the party of in, and I think it's time we now have a proper public debate so that the public can listen to the two sides of the argument and judge for themselves.
OK, so you're saying when Nigel Farage is there this time tomorrow, you're ready for the debate, we'll host it here, we'll take calls from around the country, and you'll do it live?
If Nigel Farage is either listening or looking at
Indeed,
this,
yes, we've got those
this programme, I hope he would take up my challenge to debate once and for all publicly: should we be in the European Union, which I believe means that we have more people in work would otherwise be the case. We keep ourselves safer because we can go after cross-border crime and terrorism. It means that we can look after the environment in the way that we can't on our own. Or do we do what UKIP want, which is to pull ourselves out of the European Union and so jeopardise millions of jobs in this country? That's the choice. Let's have the debate out in the open, and I'm very happy and very keen to debate that with Nigel Farage directly.
Well, speaking on behalf of LBC, I've taken the decision. We're equally as keen, and let's see if we can put it on LBC. That question will be put to Nigel Farage. Deputy Prime Minister will let you know. Let's see what he says. Mr. Farage, it is very much over to you. The ball is in your court. Other calls, if we could.
Sam in Bromley. Hello, Sam.
Hi there, Nick.
Hello.
My brother's on benefits.
Yep.
He's recently gone into work, and now he's earning less than he can afford to pay his bills. So basically, luckily he's got a family behind him. We're all putting money in the pot, and he's able to eat. What can you do to obviously help this stop this from happening? If I'm sitting at home on benefits, I'm earning more than I am than when I'm going to work. So.
Absolutely, sir. Well, that is precisely why we're changing the benefit system, and I was referring to this earlier, to sort of boil down all these lots and lots of different benefits that people can get into one single payment, if you like, which we're going to call the universal credit. And the way the universal credit is going to be introduced will mean that it always pays for your brother to work rather than to be on benefits. So that's precisely why we are changing the system. So, as I said earlier, there is always an incentive for people to work.
All right, let's go to some email questions. I haven't done enough of those. This is from Joyce in Kent. Mr. Clegg, I was horrified by your revelation this week that mentally sick children are locked up in police cells. I was heartened by you trying to do something about it. Please tell me when this horrific practice will end, Mr. Clegg. This was an initiative you announced this week, wasn't it?
I announced some weeks ago that we want to change the way in which children are provided with proper mental health services. And Joyce, like you, I'm also horrified at the idea that vulnerable young children end up either being shunted hundreds of miles across the country or end up in a police cell. It's almost guaranteed to make their condition even worse, and that's why I've insisted in this coalition government that we say to those people who decide where money is allocated within the NHS in each of the local NHS areas that they are under no illusion that mental health needs to be treated with the same priority as physical health. That hasn't always been the case. Mental health for too long has been treated as a Cinderella service, and that's why we've written into the mandate, in effect, the kind of constitution, if you like, of the NHS, that they must be put on the same, on the same footing. Because for far, far too long, we've been willing to talk openly about, a relative's broken ankle, but not a relative's mental health condition. And yet, time and time again, you'll hear that people who go to a GP with a physical problem actually are struggling with an underlying mental health issue. And that's why I like you, Joyce, I think we are making real progress, but we need to make more urgent progress.
OK, we'll finish with one last email and then one final question from me. This comes in from Dan in Leicestershire. There was a picture in the paper of David Cameron. He's gone grey. Have you?
Actually, I suspect I will cover I'll cover my temples.
How come you haven't done that then?
What do you mean we haven't done?
Well, you haven't gone grey.
Well, maybe I have in places. Look, I'm not going to talk about your rash or my grey hairs on public national radio. We just stop going on about
you've talked, which was a made-up
physical
rash.
details.
I'm going to come to some personal grief then for you to end with.
Right.
I understand you went out last night.
I did,
and you had an horrific evening.
No, I had a great evening. I went with Miriam and I went with two of our boys to see Arsenal against Bayern. And after those first 10 spectacular minutes, when we were just running circles around them to lose 2-0 at the end.
If you want anyone to take a penalty, you'd give it to a German. I'm not being glib, but you would, wouldn't you?
Yeah, look, Ozil is a beautiful player. I suppose it happens to the best of players that they don't put even a penalty in the back of the net. I mean, it was just... My head was in my hands. But anyway...
is it game over for Arsenal?
No, of course not. It is never game over.
2-0 going back to Bayern Munich.
They won with some margin against Bayern away last year, so they could do it again this year.
Oh, OK. Did you have a nice time out of it?
Had a great time. Fantastic time.
OK, thank you very much indeed. Nick Clegg, you will return, and we will find out. Nigel Farage, you're in the hot seat. If you're listening now, we need that answer. The gauntlet has been thrown down by the Deputy Prime Minister here on Call Clegg. You'll hear Nigel Farage. If not but any earlier, you'll definitely hear him tomorrow. Thanks.
Thank you.
To you. News here on LBC follows this.
Good morning, I'm Lisa Aziz. Nick Clegg has challenged the leader of the UK Independence Party to a live debate on LBC about whether the UK should be in or out of Europe.